that's something we could definitely point to bring them down. We've done, and we'll go through the digital trail of because we have
So impressed by you. That's amazing.
How we doing?
That's a lot of students.
Mr. Linda,
A lot of students.
that's about it?
Yeah.
All right, everybody. So let me have your attention. I don't really talk too much on the mic because I got a big enough voice, I think. I don't really like hearing my voice on the mic. But, so, you guys, we've talked about this. You guys know how to behave. You guys know what's expected of you. We have our guests here, Andrew Schot and Sharon Glassman, right?
Glassberg.
Who are here, and Sharon is here to assist Andrew with questions, answers, clarification of anything like that. Funny story I'm going to share with you guys. This just happened this morning. Is so Andrew Schot is the father of Hans Schot, who's the man standing back there waving at you guys, who was my 5th grade teacher at Esperanza Elementary School. So please give a round of applause to Mr. Schot. When we get back to class, I'll share some fun stories from our 5th grade class. But we'll have a question portion, and so Andrew is going to talk to you guys about everything and anything Andrew wants to talk to you guys about, and then you guys will have an opportunity to ask questions. When we ask questions, I'll have Ms. Chavarria will have the microphone, and when she brings it to you for your question, stand up, speak loudly into the mic so that Andrew can hear you, and then he can answer your question, okay? Are we all good? All right. Andrew, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm glad to see a lot of people here. My name is Andrew Schot. I was born and raised in a small country in Western Europe known as the Netherlands. Some people refer to it as Holland. And I lived there, I was born in 1931, 94 years ago. And I lived there, fat, cat, and happy. Went to school there, and everything was great until when I was 9 years old, things took a tremendous change. World War II started for the Netherlands. The German forces invaded and took over the Netherlands. Well, the Netherlands was a neutral country like Sweden and Switzerland, but if you look at the map, it was very understandable that Hitler was not going to leave that coastline across the sea from England exposed like that. So he invaded Holland, and we didn't have much of a force because of being neutral. Our mobile forces were soldiers on bicycles, and the Germans came across with tanks and artillery and airplanes and stuff like that, so there wasn't much of a fight. And then we were occupied, and things started to change quite a bit. The persecution of Jews started. Well, at the time, I didn't even know I had any Jewish affiliation. According to the Jewish law that was really prominent at the time, you were what your mother was. And my mother was a Gentile or a Christian. And my dad was a Jew, but he was not a practicing Jew, so I didn't consider myself a Jew. But the Nuremberg rule that the Nazis used is if you had 3 or more Jewish grandparents, you were considered a full-blooded Jew. Well, I had 3 Jewish grandparents, both grandparents on my dad's side and my grandfather on my mother's side. So I was considered a full-blooded Jew, and me and my siblings were treated accordingly. So the first thing that really happened to me is one day I was in school, and the teacher gave me an envelope to take home to my mom. Well, in those days, we as kids did things that you wouldn't think of doing, and I'm sure you do things that we wouldn't think of doing. But on the way home, I took my little pocket knife and put some spit on it. And the glue on the envelopes in those days was not very good, so it came open very easily. And inside there was a piece of yellow cloth with 2 stars imprinted on it with the word Jew in the center of it. And then it had a piece of paper and it said that I was to wear one of those on my left breast on my outer garments from that day forward. And failed to do so would be punishable by death. And then that kind of shook me a little bit, but nevertheless I sealed the envelope back up, gave it to Mom, and acted surprised when she opened it up. And Mom started crying. And the reason is my mom had been an adult during World War I, so she knew what war was all about and things that were to come. But anyway, she put it on my little jacket for the following day in school. And when I got there in the class I was in, we had 35 students. Only 2 of us wore a star, me and a little girl. She didn't make it. But we had, in those days, we had what we call a class bully. I don't think you have them anymore, do you? What it used to be is some guy that had a lot of brawn and very little brain. And, but he came to me and he wanted to know where he could get one of those stars. Well, it became very obvious very soon that he really didn't want one. That thing started to happen. They started to close down all places of entertainment were the first ones. They put big signs and says off limits to Jews. And the city parks, the swimming pools, the theaters, all of those were put off limits. And then they started the stores. They put the stores off limits. Well, we didn't have supermarkets and stuff like they have today, Costco's and Walmart's, all of them are small stores, but nevertheless, what they did in each neighborhood, they allowed one grocery store to close early one day and open up again and sell to Jews. And the first time that happened in our neighborhood, that Wednesday was the day. And that first Wednesday, my mom took me to the store with her. And when we got there was a sign in the window. And I looked at that, and Mom looked at that, and it said, "No Jews allowed when humans are on the premises." So she never took me to the store again. But and then things got worse and worse and worse. I had my dad, who was a Jew, and I had one brother and 2 sisters, all of them older than me. And the first one in our family that got affected, they had what they call the first razzia. When the Germans took trucks through the streets of Amsterdam and rounded up all the Jewish men who worked in it. Well, you're going to say, how did they know they were Jews? Well, in those days, Holland was not very diversified. And most Dutch were either blondes or redheads. If you saw somebody with black hair, there was a 95% chance you were looking at a Jew. So they rounded up everybody with dark hair, and if they could prove they were not Jews, they were let go, but otherwise they were stripped away. Well, people really got upset over that, and then they started explaining that the reason they were doing that, they needed their workers in the German industries because all the German men were in the military. Well, through the grapevine, we found out that that's really not what happened. They sent them to concentration camps. my brother was taken. He was 8 years older than me, and he ended up at Auschwitz. And then things got worse and worse and worse. And another thing is they took the Jewish kids and banned them from public schools. And what they did, they had one small schools they dedicated for the Jewish students. I don't remember the real name of it, but it was referred to as the Jew school. So all the Jewish kids went to one school. And so I met a lot of people that I had never seen before, including one of them that became quite famous, a girl by the name of Anne Frank. And her older sister, Margot, went to the same school. And even though they didn't live in the same neighborhood as me, they lived in a more upscale neighborhood, their dad's business was right across the canal from where I lived. And some afternoons after school, the girls would go to his place of business and go home with him. And as they did, they walked with me and some of the other kids of that neighborhood. So I got to know Anne and her sister. I didn't become a close friend. Anne was a year and a half older than me, and her sister was even older than that, but we got to know each other a little bit. And then they started rounding up more and more Jews. The next thing in our family, but how many of you are familiar with the Anne Frank story? You've read the book or something? You don't count. Anne Frank's older sister got a notification to report to the railroad station for what they call deportation. Well, my dad got one of those about 6 months earlier, and he looked at that and he decided he was not going to go. So he went into hiding. Well, at that time there was not much experience or any help in people hiding, but he came home on weekends to have dinner with the family. So that only lasted about a couple of weeks, and then on a Sunday evening, after dinner, I went to play out with my friends, and 3 German soldiers in full uniform with submachine guns came to the house, and they went in, and when they came back out, they had my dad. And so I went over there to try to talk to him, but they wouldn't let me come close to him. And then my dad was not a very big man, he was maybe 5'8", and he was a gymnastics teacher. So they marched him between those 3 big German guards, and I watched them march down the street. And my dad went to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. So that's when Mom decided that what was left, my older sister was not living at home. She was an interpreter, and she was on a trip with some English representatives, and we thought that they had taken her back to England with them. After the war, we found out that was not true. The British delegation that she was interpreting for didn't make it back to England either. So it was just Mom, a sister that was 6 years older than me, and myself. And Mom got us together, and she says, I think it's time for us to go into hiding. So she had it all planned out, but she didn't tell us any of the details. And what she did one Wednesday, when the grocery store was allowed to sell to Jews, she had saved some paper shopping bags, and she put necessities in those bags. And that Wednesday afternoon, she took us out and we carried those paper bags. If you carried a suitcase, people knew what you were doing. So by hoping that people would think that we'd been to the grocery store. And she took us just down the street, and we had canal houses there, and there was about a block and a half away, there was one that was a small one, and had been empty for as long as I remember. And that's where she took us. And when we got there, the stairwell had already been tore out, but there was a homemade ladder there. So we got in there, we climbed to the next level, and then one level up there was the attic. And we got to the attic, and there were already some of our relatives there. And my sister looked at me and she said, "This is not going to work." She said, we can't survive here amongst these older people. They were all in their 30s. And so she said they have to be totally quiet. There was no water, no toilet facilities, no heat, no light, no nothing. So she told Mom, she said, why don't you let Andy and me go to the northern part of Holland? And the northern part is where the farm country is. If you look at the map of Holland, you see all the cities are in the southern half, and all the empty spaces are up north, and that's the farmland. And there is a little island off of there where there's a school, like a junior college, that was teaching physical education teachers. My dad had gone to that school, and my sister was enrolled in that, but she got kicked out because she was a Jew. So she said, I know the territory, and we can survive along the farms there. So Mom agreed to that, and we went to the harbor of Amsterdam, which is separated from the northern province of Friesland by what was known as the 𝚅𝚒𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘, or it's now known as the 𝐈𝐧𝐬𝐬𝐫𝐢𝐵. But they had freighters going across there all the time, hauling manufactured goods north and hauling food items south. And my sister, she talked one of those captains into taking us across the lake with him. And so that night we went. And when we got to there, she had it all planned out. What we did is, early in the mornings, first of all, we had a place where we could sleep. And people say, well, why did you just sleep on the grass? Well, the first statement about the grass in the Netherlands is, in Holland, the grass is always wet, because most of Holland is below sea level. And so if you go to sleep in that wet grass, you may not wake up. And so what we did, we'd find a barn. Every farm there had the same type of barn, a red brick building with a red tile roof and 2 levels. And we would go there, and we'd go to the top level where they stored their field products, like their grains and stuff like that, straw and hay was stored up there, and below were animals or farm equipment. And so we'd go up there and sleep there, and then the following morning, we'd get up and leave the place, because we didn't want the farmer to get into trouble for hiding Jews. So then we'd go out and watch the farm hands go out in the fields to work. And they went by horse and wagon. There had no vehicles, no motorized vehicles, and even if they had, there was no gasoline. So we'd follow the wagon with the most workers out to the field, and when they got there, we stayed by the wagon and look out for German patrols. And they were easy to spot because Holland is flat. Now I know that some teachers say there is a mountain in Holland, Well, there is a mountain in Holland that it's only 27 feet high. So, that's not as high as the school buildings are. But anyway, and another thing is, they have to put the roads, they can't put the roads flat with the rest of the country because it would just sink in. So David built an embankment and put the road on top of that. So when you're in the field, you can see a long ways, and the roads are elevated, so you can see a vehicle miles away. Another thing we had to do is eat. And the first thing what he did is at night, before going to bed, we raided the vegetable garden of the farm. We take whatever was there, radishes, lettuce, or whatever, and eat that. But we found out the farmers didn't like that because they didn't grow those vegetables for the market, they grew them for their own consumption, and they didn't appreciate the stealing. And there were others besides us that were doing it. So we found out because they started putting barbed wire around them. So we didn't want to get them mad at us, so we quit doing that. But my sister told me something else, we would eat eggs. Well, we couldn't go to the store and buy eggs or anything like that. And we couldn't raid the chicken coop because if you go in a chicken coop at night, the rooster there will let you know, or let the farmer know that we're there. So, but she said we would eat wild bird eggs. And in Holland, the pastures are divided by little drainage ditches. And on the sides of those ditches, these wild birds have built their nests and lay their eggs. And so we go out and steal a couple of those eggs. And my sister showed me how to eat raw eggs because we had no facilities to cook them or fry them or anything. And she said, you take the egg and put it in. Now don't try this at home, okay? Because I know some years ago I was at amphitheater school and I told this and a couple of the guys went home and tried that. And one thing is, one of them got sick and the other one dropped it on the carpet and then they blamed it on me. So don't try this. But anyway, you cup it in the hand and then you take a ballpoint pen and tap a little hole in it. Then you turn it over, put a finger over that hole and tap a little bigger hole on that side. Now, we didn't use a ballpoint pen. Any idea why not? They haven't been invented yet. We use a little twig. But anyway, take that in your mouth and you let go of that little hole and you suck the egg out. Well, the first time I tried that, I got that egg to about here, and the stench of it was more than I could handle, And my sister said, well, you dummy, you're supposed to take the other hand and hold your nose so you can't smell it. Well, I tried that, and it didn't work too well. But she made me eat at least one egg a week. And another thing we ate, we were fortunate more than the people that were hiding in the city because when we were up there in the mornings when we left, the floors of those upper levels were always covered with grains. And we would just fill our pockets full of those grains. And during the day when we got hungry, we'd just take a hand out, blow the dirt out of it, and eat those. So we did all right. And then I remember one night, though we were watching through the field, because when the farmer hands left, we would leave the area. We would never stay in the same area at night where we had stayed during the day, because you couldn't count on somebody not calling the police and telling, hey, we got some Jews on the farm. So we disappeared from that area and looked for a place to sleep. Well, one night it was raining, cloudy, dark, no moonlight, and we were walking through the field. And all of a sudden, my sister grabbed my arm and squeezed. That was our signal of danger, because if you hollered out, stop, or whatever, you could hear voices in that wet country a long ways off. So that was our signal. So I stopped, and my sister put her mouth through my ear and she says, look ahead. And I did, and I saw the embankment of the road. And on top of the road, I saw silhouettes of trucks. And then I saw at one end of them some little sparks, little lights. And I heard some laughter. And evidently what we had run across is a convoy of trucks heading for Germany, German trucks. And they had taken a smoke break. And the little glows we saw were from the cigarette. So I saw that, and I started to turn around to get out of the area. And my sister grabbed me and she says, I wonder what's in those trucks. And I told her, I don't care. Those were the enemy, and I didn't want any part of it. So, but nevertheless, she was in charge. So we went across that road, and on both sides of the road there again was a drainage ditch. And we walked through that drainage ditch. It had about 12 to 14 inches of water in it. And we very carefully climbed up that embankment of about 10, 11 feet. And we got to the last truck. That's where we went. And my sister got to the front part of it, and I was in the rear part of it, and I put my hands underneath the canvas. They were typical military trucks, with the canvas stretched over it. And I got a hold of something, but I couldn't get it out. It was too big. And I worked on it, and then finally my sister came over. She said, they're breaking up, let's get out of here. I said, well, I have a hold of something, I can't get it out. So she stepped beside me, put her foot up against the tire, and pulled that canvas out. And I got out what I had a hold of. But then we could hear footsteps. So we turned around, and don't us that embankment was steep enough, he had to very carefully climb up on it. We thought we could just walk down. So when we took our first step, both of us tumbled head over heels into the drainage ditch. And I thought that was funny, so I started laughing, and my sister didn't think it was funny, so she grabbed the back of my head and pushed it under water. When she let go, I got the idea to keep quiet. And we laid in that water for a little while until those trucks moved out. And then we went and found a place to sleep. The following morning, we took inventory, and what I had was a wheel of cheese. Now, cheese comes in different formats. When you go to a deli, you find those great big round wheels of cheese. I had one of those. My sister, on the other hand, had a bag of coffee beans. Totally useless to us. We couldn't grind them. We had no place to cook them anyway. But we ate off of that wheel of cheese for a long time, and we even shared with some other people. And my sister, I said, what are we going to do with coffee beans? She said, I have a plan. So the following day, she went to one of the farmhands and told him she would like to borrow his raincoat. Well, my sister at that time, she was in her late teens, but she was almost 20, and she was kind of a pretty girl, and she could have talked that guy out of the farm, but all she wanted was his raincoat. And she took his raincoat, and then she took me and put me in the field behind a haystack. And she said, well, you stay here until I come back. And she put that raincoat on to cover up the star, and she put the bag of coffee beans under that, and she left. The minute she was out of sight, I got scared to death. What happened if she goes to town to make a trade for that coffee, and they just take her? So I laid there, and I bet you I lost a lot of weight. But finally that evening she came back, and she started telling me what had happened. And I said, before you say anything more, let's make a deal. You don't leave me again. And she agreed to that. And then she told me that she had gone to town, and she had gone to one of the schools that had been made into a German army caserne, and she went and looked for the officer's mess steward. And when she found him, she told him that she had a bag of coffee beans that she was willing to trade. Well, he, of course, was interested because coffee beans don't grow in Europe. They grow in South America. And he hadn't been able to serve the officers coffee for some time. They had a substitute made out of grain, but it didn't taste anything like coffee. So he traded her for some food items, and then she came back. She showed me she had chunks of bread and stuff like that. And so we had something different to eat for a while. But the most part of what we ate while we were in the fields was sugar beets. I don't know if any of you been around sugar beets, but they look like a large turnip. And if you cut them all up, they have white meat like an apple, but they're sweeter than apples. They make sugar from sugar beets. And so we, when the farmers harvest them, they just pile them in the field. And so we went just took one of them, and one of them lasted us for about 3 days. So my sister and I, people say, they tell me, he said, well, that's quite an adventure. I wouldn't mind trying that. Well, my sister and I lived like that for 2 years. We didn't know where the rest of our family was, whether they were alive or not. But we went for 2 years, and then we made a mistake. One evening, again, it was dark, and we were tired, cold, and hungry. And we found the first farm, and we just climbed up in it and went to the top and camped out right by that stairwell. The following morning, I woke up to a strange noise. And I got up, and the way that those barns were at the top level, at the one end of it was a set of doors that opened to nowhere. And it had a beam sticking out with a hook on it so they could haul things up to the second level. When I opened one of those doors, I saw 3 German trucks, 3 or 4, coming right at us. So I turned around to get to my sister, and when I did, I noticed there were over a dozen other people sleeping in that attic. What they were a bunch of people like us, but they had been bedded down there for some time, and you couldn't get away with it. Somebody's going to turn it in. So I got to my sister and I said, let's get out of here. The Germans are coming. So we went down the stairs, and when we got about halfway through, I hollered back to the people upstairs and I said, the Germans are coming. I wanted to make sure my sister and I got out of there before things went really bad. So we started running. I don't know where we were going, but we started running nevertheless. And then I started hearing gunfire. And I looked back for where my sister had been running slightly to the left and behind me, and she was no longer there. But I didn't stop, I kept running. And then something hit my leg, and I went down. And I looked at my leg and I could see a little bit of blood. But not much. After the war, it was determined I was hit by a ricochet bullet. So I decided to get up and start running again. And the reason I could see that little bit of blood is because in the Netherlands, boys under the age of 14 did never wear long pants, not even to church. You wore shorts. And I remember that very well because in the wintertime, my mom got me ready for school. She put on my flannel shirt, put on my heavy jacket, and then a wool cap and wool shawl, wool mittens, and shorts. So anyway, when I looked up, I looked right into the barrel of a rifle. One of the German soldiers standing there pointing a rifle at me. So I decided that I'd be smarter just to do what he wants me. And he took me to where the trucks were parked, and there were already a bunch of other guys there. And so they loaded me into the truck, and noticed that the shooting stopped. And then after a while, they drove us off. And of course, the thing on my mind, where is my sister? And so they took us to a gathering camp in Holland. And on Wednesday, they had a train there to take people to the concentration camps. Well, when Wednesday came, they marched me down the platform where the train was, and I could see between the cars there was another platform and another train. And on that platform were nothing but women. And all of a sudden I saw my sister. And I hollered out at her, and she didn't hear me, and before I could holler again, one of the guards hit me in the back with his rifle. So, but at least I knew she was alive. And then they put us in cattle cars. They put us in real tight. I know I went in there and I was standing behind a guy that was bigger, well, everybody was bigger than me, but he was quite big, and my nose was pushed into his shoulder blades. And that's the way I couldn't move or anything like that. People died on those trips to the camps in those cars, and they couldn't even fall down. So anyway, the train that we were supposed to, both trains were supposed to go, this we found out after the war, they were scheduled to go to 𝚑𝚘 concentration camp. But the train my sister was on left first, and they found out that the railway into 𝚑𝚘 camp was bombed the night before, so they couldn't get through. So they diverted the train a little farther south, and she ended up at Dachau. And my train was still in the station when they found out, so they waited for further instructions, and they were told to take the train to Bergen-Belsen. But they also were told to take the last 2 carloads and drop them off at Papenburg, which was just about 10-15 miles short of Bergen-Belsen. Fortunately, very fortunately, I was in the next to the last car. Had I been in one of the other cars, I was going to Bergen-Belsen and somebody else would be sitting in this seat. So we got there at night, and they unloaded us and they marched us into the camp. And the first barracks we got to, they opened the door, they pushed me inside, and then they marched the rest of them on. I spent the first night there sitting by the door. I could hear some moaning and groaning and some snoring from people laying in the barracks, but I stayed by the door, and I don't know, I cried, most likely I did. But one thing came to my mind: why am I here? What have I done to deserve this? On the following morning, a whistle blew and the door opened up, and everybody ran out, and I went out, and they had a roll call. And after the roll call, they had a few minutes of propaganda. And then they marched people off to work. They did march me off the first day. They kept me there to process me in. And they took away my clothing and gave me some rags to put on. And then they shaved my hair off. And then but the following day, the same thing happened again, and I was put on a work detail. We had lots of work details there. There were 2 automotive factories in the area and a shipbuilding outfit. And most of the guys were working in the shipbuilding, but I never worked on the shipbuilding, and I never worked in the car manufacturing plant. I was always in the field duty, and so I spent the next 13 months in that concentration camp. It was a horrible place. The barracks, we had no beds. They just had straw on the floor with a walkway in the middle. And people just laid on the straw. When I got there were 60, 65 people sleeping in that barracks. And everybody was ill. Most people were suffering from diarrhea and vomiting because of the diet. And there were no toilet facilities in the barracks, and it was locked in at night. So it was a pretty terrible place. And even during the work details, if you didn't work hard enough, you got beat. And one of the worst things is food. They never fed us anything before going to work, but about lunchtime they had somebody come out, usually a young lady or a farm woman or something, come out with some dark rye bread covered with lard. And they gave us each a piece of that lard covered bread, and that was it for lunch. They didn't give us anything to drink, but there were plenty of water pools in the field to drink out of. At night, when we got back to camp, they gave us a cup of soup. They called it potato soup, we called it nut soup. Because what it was, when they boiled the potatoes for the guards, they used huge kettles. And when they got done, they poured the water off, and they took the potatoes and put them on the tables in the skins for the guards. That water they poured off became our soup. Most days they had some turnips sliced into it, but not everything. And that's all the food we had. So like I said, most guys died of starvation or of dysentery. I was there for 13 months in that camp, and then we were liberated. We saw it coming because I remember one day we fell out and we could hear some muffled sounds of explosions. And one of the prisoners that had been a French artillery officer told us we were hearing mortars. And he said, and you knew that means that they're within 3 miles of us. So then one day we woke up and we got outside, and outside the gate on the roadway was a tank. And it was not a German tank. And we thought that was it, we were going to be liberated. But before we could say much of anything, down the road an 88 cannon, German cannon, fired a shot at that tank and blew the turd right out of it. So that was it. But we kept hearing the noise, and the air traffic became heavier and heavier. So then one morning I woke up and everybody was looking out. And I walked to the window and I tried to look out, but they wouldn't let me. I was the only kid there, but then all of a sudden all of them ran to the door and started banging the door down. And that's when I looked out and I saw that 𝐭𝐨𝐫𝐢𝐳, which was a heavy British thing, had come through the gates and was slowly approaching our barracks. And then I saw soldiers coming from behind the tank. And I couldn't identify him, but all of a sudden our guys succeeded in busting the door down and they ran outside. And those guys that came from behind the tank went behind the tank again. And I said, oh my gosh, they're afraid of us. Well, what happened is that when that door opened up and those guys pulled out, the stench was just more than those soldiers could handle. So they went back and then they came back again. They were wearing a handkerchief or something like that over their nose. A couple of them were wearing gas masks. And they liberated us. Well, I had no idea where they were. I couldn't understand the word they said. But the first thing they did is they took off all of our clothes. And then they sprayed us with a white powder. What they had found, we were one of the latter camps to be liberated. What they had found in all the camps is they had typhus carried by lice, and it was a deadly disease because there was no known cure for it. So when they came to our camp, they knew better. So they put us in there, and then they sprayed it with powder. And then they gave us some odds and clothing to wear. Well, that powder killed the lice, but later they found out that it was also good at killing people. It was called DDT. And they banned it worldwide because of it. But it didn't kill me, and we didn't have typhus. We had lice, but no typhus. And then they gave us a biscuit. And that was the first, real food that we had. And I took that in my mouth and I bit on it and about broke my jaw. It was so hard. And I said, those guys must be Canadians and they're giving us used hockey pucks. And it took me about an hour and a half or so to eat that one biscuit. And they tried talking to us, but I couldn't understand a word. And then later that evening, they gave us another biscuit. But this time, they gave us a little cup of tea. No, I know now who these guys are. Any idea? The British. Because it's the only army in the world that I know that carries tea at the combat. But we were liberated by the British, and they started taking prisoners from the camp by truck into town, where they had taken the school building and made an aid station out of it and then processed them there. They only took one truckload at a time. I went the same day, later that night, but some of the guys were in that camp another 2 or 3 days before they got hauled out. But when I got to the town, they put a play card on a piece of twine around our neck, and they made notations of that. And so they sent us from one station to another. And at one station where they weighed us, there was a nurse that was from Holland. So for the first time since I've been in the camp, I could speak to somebody in Dutch. And she told me how things were in Holland, how bad things got and all that. And then every day I went to see her and talk to her. And in the meantime, they started feeding us different things. I know the first thing they fed us with mush, like oatmeal or cream of wheat or whatever, and it was delicious. And then they started adding stuff slowly on. And then after a few days, I got to my nurse and she told me, she said, how would you like to go home? I said, boy, I've been ready for that for a long time. She said, well, she said, you're doing real well. She said, we categorize people into three. Those that are in real bad shape, we know we can't save, we send them to a place where they can die in peace. Others that can be treated, we send to hospitals. He said, you are in a category 3, you're in good shape, and you've gained 16 pounds since you've been here. I was there for 9-10 days. I said, great, how much do I weigh? She said, well, you're all the way up to 95 pounds. So the first time she weighed me, I weighed 79. That was after 2 biscuits. But anyway, they loaded me on a truck and we went back to Amsterdam. And I went to my grandma's place, and my mom was there. They had survived that attic. They went through some terrible times, but they survived. And then, but now, the worst time came for Mom. She would spend every day going to the railroad station, the bus station, watching people come back and to see if anybody knew anything about any of the rest of our family. And nothing happened. And then about 2 weeks later, ambulance pulled up to the house, and they brought my sister, the one I was in the field with. She had survived 𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚘. She was in bad shape, but nevertheless she survived. And then we went for months. Mom tried to find out what happened to the rest. And finally she got us together and she says, you know, that's it. Nobody else is coming home. She said, what we're going to do is I'm going to put us in for immigration because there are too many empty chairs here. So she put in for New Zealand, South Africa, Canada, Australia, and the United States. Well, after a couple of months, we got a note that the government of New Zealand would accept us. And before we finished the paperwork and sent it in, we got notified that the Americans would take us. Well, the thing is, Mom had a brother in the United States that had moved there in the 30s. So we had somebody to go to. So we decided to wait for the visa to come to the United States. And we finally did. And we came to the United States in 1950, January of 1950. And aboard the ship, Mom got us together and she says, well, we have an opportunity to start a new life. So let's not talk about what happened, let's just look for the future. And we kept that promise, except sometime later, I was in Carolina in the Army, and I talked to Mom on the phone, and I said, Mom, I lost 15 pounds. She said, you what? I said, I lost 15 pounds. She said, you're sick? I said, no, Mom, I went on a diet. She said, that's just like you. The good Lord takes you clear across the ocean to a land where there's plenty after you almost starved to death, and now you refuse to eat? That's the last time I dieted. But another thing is, you know, coming to the United States, the first thing is you need a job. And I got a job at a gas station, a new gas station. There were 24 pumps. And I went to work there, and the thing is, I couldn't pump gas because I couldn't speak English. So all I did was wash windows. And then, but I remember they pumped gas at 18.2 cents per gallon. So and I did that for about a week or so. And then, but then the government stepped in later, a little later, and gave me a job. I got a letter, and it had a seal of the United States on it, and it looked official, but I couldn't read English, so I took it to my landlord, who was a German immigrant. He had been stationed in the army in Germany, so he couldn't read German. And I took it to him, and he opened it up, and he started laughing. I said, "What's so funny?" He said, "You've been drafted." So it was just at the start of the Korean War. So I went into the army. And in the army, I learned how to speak English. In a real funny way, you know. When they put me on guard duty and I couldn't read the instructions, they finally found out that, you know, I couldn't speak or read or write English. So they took me to the education office, and the officer in charge, they didn't know what to do with me. So what he did, he put me in one of those desk chairs and gave me a stack of comic books. And he said, "Here, read those." And it worked, because these were the old time. I don't know if you ever seen it, like Dogwood and Blondie and stuff like that. You could look at the caption and look at the pictures and see and get the idea what the caption said. So I learned how to read English by comic books. And but then after training and everything like that, they were going to send me to Germany. And I broke out in a cold sweat. And I went to see the first sergeant, and he took me to see the commander. And the commander sent me to see the psychologist. And she interviewed me and talked to me. And then she took me to the regimental commander, and she told him, she said, "Sir, I don't think it's a good idea to send this man to Germany with a loaded rifle." So they sent me to Korea instead. After the Korean War, I quit the Army and went into the Air Force. And I retired here at Davis Mountain Air Force Base as a first sergeant. And I married an American girl. I had 3 sons. One of them is sitting over there. Like I was introduced earlier, he was your first teacher. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's now at the district. But I have 3 sons, 5 grandkids, and 11 great-grandkids. And things are quite good. I'm 94 years old, happy to be alive, but there's something I want to tell you. What happened to me and the rest of the Jews is not your fault, and there's nothing you can do about it to undo it. But you can stop it from happening again. Because this prejudice is a bad, bad thing. It causes wars. It causes a lot of... If you have friends that teach this kind of garbage, that one race of people is superior to another race, get away from them because it's contagious. And better yet, tell them you don't appreciate what they stand for. And in that case, if you do that, then maybe your children and my great-great-grandchildren can live in peace and harmony. Thank you very much for being here, and may God bless you.
I know we're going to get to questions, and I thank you for being such an amazing group, weren't they? Wow. Weren't they an amazing group?
Yeah.
Yes. So I know some of you are reading Night by 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐫𝐢𝐬𝐲𝐬, another Holocaust survivor. 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐬𝐬𝐲𝐬 said, when you hear a witness, you become a witness. And I want you to take those words to heart with what you have experienced here this morning. Andrew's 4 years old. You will be one of the last group of people to be able to hear directly from a Holocaust survivor. And I want you to take the words of 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐬𝐬𝐬 to heart and become the next generation of witnesses who will not only tell Andrew's story, but also be the ambassadors for love over hate, for kindness over hate again. So take those words to heart.
Does anybody have a question?
Do you think World War II made a big change to the activity,
Made a big change to what?
to the world, like right now?
Did World War II make a big change in our world?
Oh, yes, it did. And we got everybody involved. But the biggest thing is a lot of people died. I remember before coming over to the United States, I went down south and went to one of the graveyards of the soldiers that were in the invasion. And I went there and it was closed at night, in the evening. But they let me in there and they had a guard and they'd take me through it. And as far as I could see, there were grave markers. And I told the guard, I said, you know, these brave men died so I could live. Because if the war would have lasted another 6 weeks, I wouldn't have made it. But yeah, it made a lot of difference, but things are getting bad again. I mean, you hear it on the news and everything all over the world. You know, you go to the Ukraine and the Middle East, and there's always war or threats of war. So, yeah, the world has changed, but not necessarily for the better.
What was your older sister's name?
What was your older sister's name?
Oh, you're talking about the sister that was with me? No, that was my younger sister. Her name was Mimi. Mimi.
Mimi. And what was your older sister's name?
My older sister's name was 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬. Now, my younger sister, although she was really banged up, she died just last year at the age of 98.
Why did you stay in Tucson after retirement?
Why did you stay in Tucson after retirement?
Well, I was here for 8.5 years, stationed there. We had bought a house, our kids were in school, and we liked Tucson. You know, there's only one place I ever lived that I liked the weather better, and that was 𝐶𝐴𝑟 Vista. Of course, when I was stationed in Fort Huachuca, there was no 𝐶𝐴𝑟 Vista.
What was the scariest thing you saw in the camps?
What was the scariest thing you saw in the camps?
Well, the scary thing I don't want to tell you about, but they were, most of the death in our camp is not a termination camp, it was a labor camp, and if anybody misbehaved, if they killed them, it was usually with a pistol shot to the head. But there were a few occasions that were really scary, but we don't want to go into those.
What's your favorite part about telling your story?
Oh, good question. What's your favorite part about telling your story?
The audience. I used to go all over the place. I traveled quite a bit. I don't travel anymore. I went out of town one time last year because my oldest son, who is not here today, but he usually takes me everywhere and he makes all the arrangements. He called me up and he said, I got a call from the Marine Corps Air Station in Yuma, and they want you to come and talk to them. I said, no, I don't go out of town anymore, even though I was stationed there in Yuma, and he was born in Yuma. He said, well, I'll call him and tell him now. So he called me back again a little later, and he said, I talked to him. He said, they're willing to pay you $2,000 if you come. I said, when are we going? That's the only time I've ever given a lecture for pay. I found out that just recently I spoke at the Air Museum, and afterwards I found out that the audience there actually had to pay to get in. I didn't get any money, but there was an admission to it. But I normally don't like that because I don't want to make, there's too many people that are trying to make money off of misery.
How do you say good morning in Dutch?
How do you say good morning in Dutch?
Goedemorgen.
Say that again.
Goedemorgen.
How old were you when you went to the campus?
How old were you when you went to Papenburg?
I had my 14th birthday in the camp. I was 13 when I went in, I was 14 when I got out.
Your age.
Roller skates.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for being here and sharing your story. What made you feel ready to talk about your story?
What made you feel ready to talk about your story?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
When I came over to the United States, I didn't talk about it. I didn't even tell my wife. But in 1996, the Anne Frank exhibit came to Tucson. And that can only come to a city one time. You know, it travels all over the world. And when it came to Tucson, one of the people that accompanied it was a family friend of my parents in Holland. And he found my name in the phone book. And he called me up and wanted to know if I was the son of 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐫𝐢𝐵 Schot. I said, yes. And he said, well, he asked me to come there and talk to the kids while they were waiting to go to the museum. And I did. That's the first time I talked about it. But one of the first groups I had in the back was my grandson. That's the first time he heard it. And that's when I went home and told the rest of the family about it. And of course the Jewish Federation picked up on this, and I started going to schools and all kinds of places to talk. But yeah, I was not ready until 96.
How old were you when you got out of the military?
How old were you when you got out of the military?
Oh, I was 45.
Does it hurt you to talk about your past?
Does it hurt you to talk about your past?
The parts that hurt, I don't talk about.
Were you the only survivor?
Of his family?
No, just like in the camps when he was in the camps. Like, was he the only survivor or were there other people?
So she's asking if you were the only survivor of Papenburg. I'm wondering if you knew how many people survived.
Oh, the thing is, the people that died there, they always send in new people. So, I mean, the camp was full of people that we were liberated. Quite a few of them died afterwards, but, shortly afterwards, they were in bad enough shape they couldn't survive. But, in our barracks, we had an average of 5 a day died.
What's the furthest state you've traveled to talk about the Holocaust?
What's the furthest state you've traveled to speak about the Holocaust?
I'm trying to look at the map. I guess Tennessee. I did 2 presentations in Tennessee.
Have you ever met anybody else from the Holocaust?
Have you met anybody else from the Holocaust?
Yeah, we have a group that meets every Wednesday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday at 10 o'clock, and we have a professional person to lead that group, and she plans all kinds of stuff for us. And that's this lady right here. But yeah, but in the group that shows up every Tuesday, there are only 2 of us that were actually in the camps. The rest of them, their stories are remarkable how they survived in hiding.
I can't fathom or comprehend whatever you have been through, but yet you have a smile on your face. How do you get to do that?
She says you can't imagine what you have been through, and yet you have a smile on your face. How do you manage to do that?
I think of my wife. I try to think pleasant things. And to see all of you here, it's good enough to bring a smile to
What
me.
did the psychologist tell you about that?
Well, yeah, the psychologist helped me a lot. After she got through with me and I got out of going to Germany, she told me one thing. She said, "You need to get rid of the hate." I really hated Germans at the time. She said, if you go around hating people the rest of your life, he won. He may not have gotten your physical body, but he got your mind. So she said, you need to get rid of that. And that has helped me a lot.
How old were you when you left the camp?
14.
Wow, a lot of questions.
How many languages did you speak?
How many languages do you speak?
Well, the thing is, besides English, that's the others that I spoke, but I find it very difficult now to carry on a conversation. And I go to some of the foreign newspapers on the internet and read them a little bit. Of course, I speak Dutch, I speak German, and I speak Frisian.
Frisian? What's Frisian? What's Frisian?
Frisian is, if you look at the old map of Europe, there's a large area of Western Europe that's known as Frisia. And that has been reduced to a province. It's called Friesland. And they have their own language. It's called Frisian. It is more like English than Dutch is.
Do you still have bad dreams about your past?
Do you still have bad dreams about your past?
No, not much anymore. I used to have that.
All right, I guess I'll go ahead and be the last question. So you know other survivors of the Holocaust here in Tucson. One person that I've spoken to my students about was Walter Feiger. Did you know Walter? And if you did, what were your interactions with Walter before his passing?
Do you know Walter Feiger? Remember Walter? And what were your interactions with him before his passing? Did you know Walter?
I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, he
My memory is, short-term memory is the first to go, but no, I don't remember Walter. I must have known him.
Yeah. Walter Feiger, I knew Walter for many, many years. He also survived the camps and also had a smile on his face, was one of the kindest, most giving people you want to meet. Walter, after being liberated from the camps, also went to the state of Israel and fought right after liberation for the Jewish state of Israel to be established. He actually moved to Tucson and owned a liquor store, of all things. After that, was an incredible member of the community, spoke a lot. Andrew is now speaking to the graduating classes of the Tucson Police Department cadets, and Walter used to also speak to them. So if any of you know people that are getting trained as TPD officers, the last part of their training before graduation is to come to the Tucson Jewish Museum and Holocaust Center and listen to Andrew speak. It's pretty amazing. Okay.
All right, I'm going to come back up here. Andrew, I want to say on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for telling your story. I've tried to express to our students how important it is to hear these testimonies from the survivors. Well, we still have some left. So thank you so much for coming out.
You're welcome.
God bless you. Thank you. So, if I'm correct, everybody's left their stuff is in their fifth period. So I guess we'll go back to your fifth periods and then move to your sixth periods from there, guys, so you can get your belongings. But teachers, you can go ahead and pull them out.
I went a little bit, I think. A little bit long. Mr. Terrence.